What happened to you guys? We lost the classroom there for a minute.
Sorry, it was a network issues. Okay. Okay.
And Joseph left. Was like, hey, it's break time. Okay. Faith over fear. So this is the high priest, one of the high priest passages, verse 14 of chapter 4. Since then we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession, for we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. So, a lot of times we come to God because we are afraid, right? Um, I know I became a Christian because I was afraid of hell. I was afraid of um, being punished eternally. Um, it took me many years to realize how to come to God because I loved Him. I really came to God first because I loved me. Um, and that's a fear-based religion, right? Uh, and fear-based activity never has uh, never has a long-term benefit for us. It might have a short-term benefit, but not a long-term benefit. And here's what I mean by that. When you're running and you're running away from something, what do we typically do after we've run a little bit of a distance? We typically stop and look over our shoulder, right? We want to see how close that thing is we're running from has gotten to us. Well, what happens when we take our eyes off the front and look at the back and we're running as fast as we can run? A lot of times we trip or we fall or we stumble on something or we get our feet mixed up or we veer off course even or we run into something. So that's what fear-based religion does. It's calling, and I'm not saying that there's never a time for respectful, reverent fear. I'm just saying mature faith is going to bring us to the throne expecting a different outcome. And that outcome here is in verse 16. We can draw near to the throne of grace, look, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Now, isn't that a beautiful thought that we can come to God because the fact that we trust that He's merciful, we know that His grace is abundant and that He's ready to help us in our time of need. That's a beautiful picture of a loving Father and a loving man who sits on the throne. And Jesus has made that possible because Jesus has come down and He's gone through what we've gone through, right? So that it's His high priesthood that says, hey, I'll bring you up to heaven and bring you to the throne of God. This isn't the only place we see this in the text. We're going to see it in other places as well. Um, but we can draw near to the throne of grace, not out of fear, but out of this desire for mercy and grace and help. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful message that people can hear. Do we need to preach and teach how fearful it is to fall under the hands of the living God, like Hebrews chapter 10 says in verses 27, 28? Absolutely. But there's also a maturity of knowing Jesus and knowing that we can come to him in this way. Let's see. All right. So that's faith over fear, chapter 4. Next is chapter 5. Um, let's see. Uh, 1 through 6, basically. And this one is called Exalt Me or Exalt Thee.
Right?
Okay.
Is it possible to try screen sharing again? You can't see.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I thought I was screen sharing this whole time. I'm sorry. Well, I'm glad you said something.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Mm, okay. All right. So there's the Bible. There's my notes. Chapter 5 is verses 1 through 6, exalt me or exalt thee. Now, this comes from the attitude of Jesus. And I would loop in Philippians 2, 1 through 11 as part of this sermon as well. Um, because when we look at Jesus here, look at what it says about verse 4. Well, just start in verse 1 of chapter 5. Um, for every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God. Now, that's interesting because by the time Jesus is alive, you've got high priests that are not acting on behalf of men. They are acting on behalf of themselves and local politics. In fact, they're not even high priests that are appointed the way God wanted them to be appointed. They are high priests appointed by Rome as a government to say we want this guy to be the high priest over. I mean, it was completely a racket. It was corrupt. Um, and I know South Africa has a history of corruption in politics as well. And so you can imagine how awful this is. So now we have a high priest, and he is appointed to act on behalf of men, right? Look at verse 2. He can deal gently because he himself is beset with weakness. Okay. And then verse 4, no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God. And then Christ, so also Christ did not exalt himself to be made a high priest, but was appointed by him. So when I come back to my sermon, anchor my take home phrase, exalt me or exalt thee. Jesus was not in the business of exalting himself. Even the day where he made the whip of cords and turned over the tables in the temple, he was not about exalting himself. Uh, this is a beautiful thing about Jesus. Jesus is the creator of the universe, the upholder of all things, the architect of DNA and the laws of nature. I mean, he is amazing, but he doesn't exalt himself. Humans, on the other hand, don't we have this great temptation to exalt ourselves, to make ourselves out to be something that's great or something that's big, something that's important, someone that should be listened to, or respected or treated fairly. I mean, all of those things come from us wanting exaltation. And Jesus, verse 5, makes it very clear he did not exalt himself. And that's the message in Philippians chapter 2 as well, is that he doesn't exalt himself. And it tells us in Philippians chapter 2 and verse 4, have this mind among yourselves, which was also or first in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped. So, um, the call of the Christian is to put ourselves on the cross, not to put ourselves on the throne, right? And Jesus did that exact same thing. Now, God puts him on a throne, but God puts him on a throne because Jesus himself didn't think he was worthy of it. Uh, God puts him on the throne because Jesus does not exalt himself. Um, and there's a throne that'll be waiting for the Christians, right? Um, but not for those who try to sit on the throne while they're here. All right. Next sermon idea, also from chapter 5, verses 7 through 10. We greater than thee. Okay, let's read the verses. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. We greater than thee. Man, I don't have my notes in front of me from that sermon, and I can't figure out why that was my take home point. It's the Son being made perfect. Salvation. I'm gonna have to come back to that one, y'all. I'm not getting it. Okay, let's move on. Chapter 5, 11 to 6, 3. Okay. And this is not a rookie. Okay, do you guys know what a rookie is? I don't know if that's a US word. When someone plays professional sports or any sport, their first year in the sport is their rookie year. Um, and so I don't know if they use that phrase in football or cricket, the rookie year. Somebody give me a yes or no on that.
Yeah,
They do?
yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I think a lot of people um, become Christians and then think they can be rookies their whole life. So uh, let's read some of this here. Chapter 5:11. About this we have much to say, and it is hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the basic principles of the oracles of God. You need milk and not solid food. For everyone who lives on milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, since he is a child of God. But solid food is for the mature, for those who have their powers of discernment trained by a constant practice to distinguish good from evil. Chapter 6. Therefore, let us leave the elementary doctrine of Christ and go on to maturity, not laying again a foundation of repentance from dead works and of faith toward God and of instruction about washings or baptisms, the laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, and eternal judgment. And this we will do if God permits. So there is this idea that these Christians have become uh, content to remain baby Christians. And you don't have to use the word rookie. Uh, you can use elementary grade students. Um, I don't know what you'd call a first year or a younger child. Um, you can use anything that denotes stages like that. But this message needs to be taught and preached. That um, verse 12 of chapter 11 says, by this time you ought to be teachers. Does that mean that everyone should be a teacher? I don't know. Um, I think I think he's just using the idea to say you ought to know this stuff, right? And that leads me to my second sermon that I preached from the same text, chapter 5:11 to 6:3. And that sermon is called Grow in What You Know. Grow in What You Know. And I just use that as my take home point because it's catchy. Grow in what you know. The idea here is that you need to keep growing in your knowledge, right? Because growing in our knowledge means that we're growing in our discernment and we can do better at distinguishing good from evil. And so he actually makes this list of things that he considers elementary. Uh, Dead works, that is probably a reference to the law of Moses and the works of the law of Moses, but I think it could be anything that is taking us away from the practice of Christianity. Faith toward God, that's a pretty big topic. Instructions about washings or baptisms, that's that's a lot of our teaching sometimes. The laying on of hands, that's talking about the transmission of miraculous gifts of the Holy Spirit and the resurrection of the dead. What's that going to be like? Where people go when they die? How are they going to come back? And eternal judgment, is there really a heaven or hell? And what's that going to look like? These are questions I get asked all the time in the church. So they really are basic things. They keep coming up over and over and over again. But he also says, hey, if you've been in the church for a while, you need to grow in what you know. Like you need to know these things and then move on from them. Uh, a lot of Christians will learn a basic five or six, seven, 10, maybe important things and then stop. And they just keep hammering those things over and over and over. Uh, and I think that's a pretty big failure uh, in making disciples, is if those disciples are stuck doing the same 13 things over and over. I got something I want to show you. I'm gonna grab something. I'll be right back. All right. This is a book called Study on First Principles. And I've got in my library, in our church library, we've got tons of these books. Not this exact book, but these first principles books. And they all have the same chapter headlines, like every single one of them. And I'm not even sure that these are the first principles. But in the churches of Christ, a lot of times, they're they're the things that we all hammer on over and over and over. Where's the piano? Instrumental music. Um, Wet all over. Teachings on baptism. Um, uh, the oneness of Christ Church. Um, Using the Bible correctly. Um, let's see. What do you call yourself? Can you call, Christian or Christian only or member of the Church of Christ or the name, the what about premillennialism? That's another one that gets it. The role of women in the church. Um, let's see. Taking the Lord's Supper every Sunday. Not having a denominational name. So you see, like these are important things, they're good things, but I don't know if they're sometimes you can see churches that's all they teach is only those things over and over and over and over again. And I think that's probably dangerous. So growing what you know, that's that sermon. The next sermon is from chapter 6, um, verses 4 through 8. And this is forward motion is my take on point. I'm not going to say a lot about this because we talked about it yesterday. That's the idea that if you stop moving forward, right? Like the warning that we're getting in this grow in what you know, stop being a rookie. If we fail to move forward, then the other thing that's going to happen is we're going to move backward. Okay. Even standing still means we're moving backward. And the danger of that is if we don't grow, um, we could fall into this trap of being in these people who have known the gospel and lived it and then fall away, right? And then he talks about what kind of land are you? Land that has drunk the rain and produces a crop. Well, to produce a crop, land has to be worked, right? It's got to be taken care of. It's got to be processed. It's got to be, um, you've got to give nutrients to it, but you've also got to work it to get a crop from it. And land that bears thorns and thistles is land that's being left alone. So, forward motion, we've got to keep moving and acting. And that's for all of our lives. We have to keep it up. I mean, I've been a Christian, an adult Christian now for 25 years. I may have 50 more years. But I've got to keep it up. I cannot stop moving. I won't say much more about that. Okay. Next one is from chapter 6, verses 9 through 12. And I call it love or slug. Um, so let's read those. Though we speak in this way, yet in your case, beloved, we feel sure of a better thing, things that belong to salvation. For God is not unjust so as to overlook your work and the love that you have shown for his name in serving the saints, as you still do. And we desire each one of you to show the same earnestness to have the full assurance of hope until the end. Man, there's that repeating of assurance and hope, so that you may not be sluggish, but imitators of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. If that's not the theme of the book, I don't know what is. Perseverance, right? And so I called this sermon take home point love or slug. And basically, um, this phrase right here, we don't want to be sluggish, so that you, can you see this, may not be sluggish. Um, I assume you know what a slug is in English. It's the little slimy bugs. They they like to eat plants, like garden plants. They're not really good for anything. They're slow, they're ugly, they're slimy, and they destroy your good stuff. Um, we don't want to be that way, right? We don't want to be sluggish. We want to instead be lovish, if I can make up a word. Yes, we want to be lovish. Um, your work and the love that you have shown for his name, how? In serving the saints as you still do. So God wants to see that. He wants to see your love. Um, and the author says we desire each one of you to show the same earnestness. So keep that up. Keep it going. Again, you can't stop forward motion. You got to keep forward motion going. Love or slug. That's a good one to talk to people who may be getting tired. All right. Next sermon comes from chapter 7. No, sorry, 6. Chapter 6, 13 through 20. And I call this Holding Hope. Um, I told you about the nautical theme. I've called this Holding the Hope rope. Because if you're on a ship and you're doing the rigging and all the ropes and stuff, holding the hope rope. And this comes from verse 18 specifically. I'll give you and we'll read this, okay? Verse 18. So that by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled for refuge might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. Um, need to hold fast to the hope. If you're in a storm on a ship, you want to hold fast to the rope because that rope is your only hope of staying on the ship. Um, so we need to learn how to hang on to hope. And again, reminder about hope. Hope is the only works in the absence of having. If you're completely satisfied and there's nothing you need or want, then you're not going to have any hope. Um, so we've got to be careful not to become complacent in the world. But then follows this famous verse. You may have heard this verse. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain, where Jesus has gone as a forerunner on our behalf. Um, there's a song, an old hymn. I don't know if y'all sing the same hymns we do, but there's a hymn that is in our songbooks. It's We have an anchor that fills our soul, steadfast and sure while the ages roll. I think that comes from chapter 6, verse 19. Okay. Next sermon comes from chapter 7. chapter 7. And I'm skipping over a lot of that Melchizedek stuff because it gave a full lesson on that. And I hope that you can find your own sermon ideas from there. But this one comes from chapter 7, verse 24. Really, all the text around it, verses 23 through 25 specifically. But this one's called All Aboard. So when a ship or a train is about to leave, the conductor calls, last call, all aboard, everyone, get on. And that's where I got the take home for this one. So let's take a look at chapter 7 and verse 24. 25. Yeah, it's 25. Let me change that. All right, so let me pick up reading in 23. We'll read through 25, okay? The former priests were many in number because they were prevented by death from continuing in office. But he, Jesus, holds his priesthood permanently because he continues forever. Consequently, he is able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for him. Well, this word uttermost uh, means completely or at all times. Okay. And the idea that I wanted people to get from that I get when I read this is there's nothing that Jesus can't save us from. Uh, some people they carry a lot of guilt and a lot of identity in the bad things that they've done. And what I like to teach from this is that you bring your worst self to God through Jesus. You bring the worst of the worst, the ugliest things that you have ever done. And you put Jesus, see if he can't save you to the uttermost. So I tell people all aboard, all aboard. Were you in a gang? All aboard. Have you committed murder? All aboard. Are you a rapist? All aboard. Um, did you take part as a soldier in genocide? All aboard. Okay. Um, Jesus can save to the uttermost or in all ways, and there's nothing. Um, if you'll draw near to God through Jesus, it can be taken care of. So that's why I preached that one. All right, this next one comes from chapter 8, and it's all of the chapter in general, and it's called Choose Your Ship. Okay. Um, this shouldn't be real hard to figure out because we studied about the difference between the covenants. Um, choose your ship, you know. What boat do you really want to be in? Do you want to be in the law of Moses boat or the law of Christ boat? Um, that being said, do you want to be under the Abraham covenant or the law of Moses or the law of Christ? Um, do you want to be in the Catholic Church boat or the Orthodox Church boat or the Baptist Church boat or the Spiritism native tribal boat, or do you want to be in Jesus's boat? Okay. So choose your ship. And chapter 8 is really all about the covenant of Jesus, that it's better, it's built on better promises, it has a better hope, it has a better future, it's better for everybody. Um, it's a better covenant. So choose your ship. And once you choose your ship, don't try to go back and say, well, I like things better. I like how things are over on that ship. I'd rather have it over here. No, you don't do that. Okay. You get on the Jesus ship and you follow you are on, he's the captain, and that's it. Um, Now some people want to do their own ship, and that's not a saving ship either. They're like, well, God knows my heart. I hear this a lot. God knows my heart. Well, yeah, that's why you need Jesus, you know? Like you don't have a good heart. You may think you have a good heart, but you don't have a good heart. So, uh you better you that's a scary thought that God knows our hearts because our hearts aren't as good as we think they are. And some people say, well, I can do my own religion between me and God. No, you can't. That ship's not going to get to heaven. You got to be on Jesus' ship, and that's that. So choose your ship. All right. The next one comes from chapter 9, verse 14. Depth charges desire. The idea here, I use the nautical term as well, depth charges. So, uh, in battle, in nautical battle, you can drop these bombs down into the water, and the idea is they're going to go down in the vicinity of like a submarine, and then they're going to blow up from down under. Um, and let's read chapter 9, verse 14. I'll point this out to you here. All right, I'm going to go back and read, start at 11. But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify the purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ? Okay. Now I want to pause. It's one thing to see an animal die. A lot of us eat animals every day. We eat some chicken, we eat some pork, we eat some beef, we eat some turkey. Uh, some people eat alligator. Some people eat wombat. Uh, you know, deer. Um, all kinds of things, right? So there's a lot of things. Buffalo. There's a lot of things we can eat. And to see an animal die is one thing, but to see a human die, that's a very different thing. And so what we're seeing here is not only does the human die, but the perfect human dies and he's sacrificed. His body is sacrificed on our behalf. That changes things. That does something inside, right? So now when I get to verse 14, it says, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living God. So, um, what I got right here is depth charges desire. So the power of the gospel is that it drops this bomb into our heart that should completely just ruin everything of this world. Because now we have the Son of God, a perfect and beautiful and holy one who has been killed for us. He's been a sacrifice for us. And so when that changes our conscience, what that's saying is it changes the way we think about what's good and bad. And I sum that up in the word desire. It changes our desire. Um, I can serve God because I can serve Jesus because this is overwhelming. It's even overwhelming to put into words what he does on our behalf. Um, and if our conscience isn't touched by that and completely rewired by that, then we may need to go back to chapter 3 and 4 and look at that hardening of the heart. You know, that's what the warning in chapter 4, chapter 6, chapter 3, chapter 6, and chapter 10 talk about is you you're basically crucifying the Lord again if you go back and sin after you know what it cost. Like, this should really change. Our desire shouldn't be to want to sin anymore, to want to gratify ourselves anymore. A lot of people are looking forward to that big Thanksgiving feast today here in the United States. And my desire is I want to be careful that I'm not going to fill my belly um, at that feast, because that's a sin. I don't want to sin. Um, I've already done plenty of that, and I have to be careful not to do it anymore. So that's where I get that sermon. Okay. The next one also comes from chapter 9, and this is from verses 23 through 28, and I call it Tear Down the Temporary. Um, my take home point is tear down the temporary. So let's take a look at the text here. Chapter 9, verse 23. Thus it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things to be purified with these rites, but the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ has entered not into holy places made with hands, which are copies of the true things, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly as the high priest enters the holy place every year with God, with blood not his own, for then he would have had to suffer repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared once for all at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment, so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. So the idea, Jesus tore down the temporary. Jesus ripped that curtain, right, in the temple. The tabernacle is gone, the temple is gone. It's been raised from the earth. It has been torn down completely because Jesus has gone into heaven to do permanent things. And I think we in our lives need to tear down the temporary so that we can also be doing heavenly things. And that is very, very difficult to do, is to tear down the temporary in our life. It's very difficult to let those things go. It's very difficult to make heaven our number one priority. So that's the sermon there. Real quick. Next one comes from chapter 10, um, verses 8 through 10, specifically verse 10. And it's called one sacrifice to rule them all. This is another cultural term that I've used that you may not understand. Let's read the text. 10 verse 10. And by that we will the and by that will we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once for all. So if you go back and read some of this, it's about the priest doing it daily, but Christ doing it once in the context here. And where I got the idea was from The Lord of the Rings, which was written by J.R.R. Tolkien in England last century. And he had this idea that there was this ring, one golden ring, and there were nine other rings, or maybe even more than that. And he had this one ring to rule all the other rings. So I played on that and grabbed the take home concept, one sacrifice to rule them all. And the idea is that that one sacrifice of Jesus can rule everything in our lives, every part of our life, every word that we speak, every action that we take. Um, and not only that, but he makes that sacrifice, that one-time sacrifice for all men, for all people. So one sacrifice to rule them all. Um, verse 14, I'll just put 10 through 14 here because verse 14 has the word perfected. For by a single offering, see this right here, he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified. A lot of us think we can never be perfect. But this says Jesus perfects. Jesus does the work of perfection. I think he makes us perfect through his sacrifice. All right, the next sermon, chapter 10, uh, verses 19 through 25. A really good text. This one's got a dumb name. I think you should come up with your own name for this one. Lettuce. I don't know if you guys have this vegetable, lettuce, in your country. It's like this leafy vegetable that we have here. It doesn't have a lot of nutritional value. I'll show you a picture of it.
You do have, but they do not
You
break. Yes.
you have lettuce?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah. Here's some pictures of lettuce. Um, there we go. There's different lettuces. Um, it's a dumb name, but it's catchy. Uh, So, in that sense, it is easy to remember, and is sometimes good for people. Um, the re where it comes from is in this text, 19 through 25. There are three places where it says "let us." Okay. Um, first one's right here in verse 22. It says, "Let us draw near." Okay. Let us draw near with a true heart. Verse 23, Let us hold fast the confession and hope. There that is again. Uh, let us draw near, let us hold fast. And then the third one is right in verse 24. Let us consider how to stir up one another. And that just makes a really good lesson. You could even, Joseph, you could make that a three-part sermon series if you wanted to. Uh, let us draw near, let us hold fast, and let us consider. Um, that'd be three good sermons, or it could be three parts to one sermon. Um, but I do think that's a good one uh, to teach. All right. Chapter 10, um, 32 through 39. The endurance. Okay. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the Endurance is the name of a ship that was used by Sir Ernest Shackleton, uh, and he tried to um, cross the Arctic, and it got packed in the ice and stopped. So let me pull up an image here for you. Here's a picture of the ship stuck in the ice. Okay. Here's a picture of the dogs and people next to the ship in the movie they made about it. Here is under the water. The You can see the name of it preserved because of the cold weather. Arg. Um, See that right there, the Endurance. Well, this ship, the Endurance, did not endure. Didn't make it. Didn't make it. So our endurance has to be better than the endurance. Um, Let me read a few verses here, beginning in verse 36. Well, let's start in verse 35, okay? Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward, for you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what is promised. I think this message is one of the most important messages for all Christians. You have need of endurance. I think there is some point where we all need to hear that. I really do. We need Jesus to say, I know you're tired. I know you're worn out. I know you're struggling. I know you're frustrating. I know all the other people you're working with are not perfect. I know your church congregation is not perfect. You have need of endurance, right? Because all those things make us want to just give up. Or we've been fighting sin or fighting an addiction or fighting family problems. And it's just like we're worn out. And he tells us, you need endurance. And then he goes on and says, don't forget, Jesus is coming back. That's what verse 37 is about. He's coming back. He actually uses a phrase from Habakkuk that says, the coming one will come and will not delay. Uh, this was a common phrase among Christians in the New Testament. The coming one will come and will not delay is a quote from Habakkuk. Let's see, chapter 2, verses 3 and 4. Here's another cultural thing that may not translate. But we have this movie series called Star Wars. Have you ever heard of Star Wars?
Hey,
Yeah. Okay. Well, in Star Wars, they have this thing called the Force, and it really is kind of like Taoism. Uh, the idea that there's this energy in the world and you can all connect to the good energy or the bad energy, whatever. It's not Christian. But in the films, they have this phrase, the Force be with you. And that's supposed to encourage you. It's supposed to strengthen you. It's supposed to think, yeah, I really hope that this greater supernatural power thing will encourage and help us. So the New Testament Christians actually used this phrase from Habakkuk, kind of like saying, "The force be with you." Uh, it was a it was a very common thing to say, "The coming one will come and will not delay." He's coming back, basically. He's coming back. He's coming back. So when you get down and you're discouraged and you think it's not worth it, they would say, "Hey, don't forget, he's coming back. Don't forget, he's coming back and he won't delay." Right? So then it goes on and he says this quote, "But my righteous one shall live by faith." And that's from Habakkuk as well. The righteous shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. This really speaks to me as a man and my pride. So every time I hear this, I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not the guy that shrinks back. I'm gonna be tough. I'm gonna endure. And it really encourages me and lifts me up. So anytime I talk to a group of men, a lot of times I'll go to this verse 38 and 39 because they don't want to be considered fearful or shrinking back. It's just not part of our nature. So, verse 39 says, "We are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but we are of those who have faith and persevere their souls." We just lost Mom Poppy off the thing. I hope I didn't offend her with that man talk stuff.
No, she's probably got internet problems.
Okay. All right, good. Okay. So I have a note here that I wanted to share with you guys on this text 32 through 39. So let me just read this. This is not for me. I assumed that it's something I heard somebody else say and I thought it was good, so I wrote it down. It says, "Not only were they shamed and marginalized, they went and stood with others facing the same thing. What they believed about the future transformed their experience in the present." Does that make sense? What they believed about the future transformed their experience in the present. I'm going to write that on the board here so you can see that. I think that's important. Okay. Of course, I misspelled something. There we go. What they believed about the future transformed their experience in the present. Um, and then what follows that is, "I will endure present pain in direct proportion with the payoff that I believe will come in the future." Okay. Let me write that down too. I will endure present pain in direct proportion to the payoff, which payoff that I believe will come in the future. For example, really? There we go. Mother giving birth. Okay. Why would a mother go through so much tremendous pain in giving birth to a child? Because of the payoff of what comes on the other side, and that's that child, right? That's why a mother goes through it. Why would we go through and endure difficult things for the sake of Christ? Because we know that the payoff is coming, right? That we'll be with him forever, that we will reign with him forever, that we will live with him forever. And so I will endure present pain in direct proportion to the payoff that I believe will come in the future. Okay, there are probably 6 or 7 more good sermons in these last 3 chapters. Um, I might have to let you find those on your own as far as time goes. I do want to say that you can do an entire sermon series from the book of Hebrews, chapter 11. It is so easy to preach. Um, if you've been teaching or preaching for any amount of time, you've probably already done it because it is just super easy to preach. But one thing that when I look at these guys and think about what they're going through and what they did and what is in the book of Hebrews in chapter 11 here. Let me see. I got something I want to I'll try to remember to send this to you next week, okay? Because I just found it. But it was a chart of Hebrews 11, and it looked at the different verbs that came after the people, uh, the different kind of verbs that they did. Maybe it was in my analysis notes here. Yeah. So you will get it. I'm going to send this to you if I get it digitalized. But basically, what did Abel do? Abel offered he offered a sacrifice. Enoch pleased God. Noah prepared the ark. Abraham obeyed the call. Sarah uh, judged God to be faithful. Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau. Jacob blessed his sons. Joseph instructed the children to bring his bones back home. Moses forsook Egypt and kept the Passover. Rahab received the spies. Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets subdued kingdoms. Women looked for the resurrection of the dead. Those who were tortured also did. And those who were mocked and scourged wandered looking for the promise. So if you think about those verbs offered, pleased, prepared, obeyed, judged, blessed, instructed, forsook, received, subdued, looked, wandered, okay? The question then is what verb follows your name if you were included in the in the Hall of Faith? If it said by faith Nick when he da 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 da, what verb would come after that? I think that's a powerful kind of illustration to use. Um, what verb follows your faith? Okay. Is it that you remained married to your spouse when you didn't want to? Is it that you gave up your job? Is it that you moved um, countries or towns or neighborhoods? Is it that um, you know, I don't know, you starved instead of stealing your food? I don't know what it means, but what verb would follow your faith if you were written about in the book of Hebrews chapter 11? That's a great question to ask. Okay. Well, class, that's all we've got time for.
You so much.
I guess we're done. Gonna miss